Welcome to the introduction to FOG Napoleonics system. This is a series of YouTube clips to help talk you through the basic game mechanics of FOG version 2. I'd like to obviously thank the folk at Slytherin who've given us the go-ahead to produce a version 2, and of course a big thank you to Terry and Mike, the original writers of the excellent version 1. So let's get into it, talking about the basic system of FOG Napoleonics. So from a game scale point of view, FOG Napoleonic is a core level game. So an 800 point army is typically a core, the basic unit being a brigade. So one unit on the table is a brigade. Each base roughly represents a battalion of infantry, a squadron of cavalry, or a battery of guns. So in this diagram here you can see a 12 unit core of 3 divisions would be approximately 15,000 men, and I'll talk you through as we go through the video a few more, get into the detail of each of those divisions. So as I said, one unit represents a brigade of infantry or cavalry or a combined battery of guns. So what does that mean? So you get small units and large units in FOG. A small unit for, in the case of infantry or cavalry, is 4 bases and represents between 12 and 2,000 infantry or 500 to 800 cavalry. 6 bases is a large unit, which can be between 2 and 3,000 infantry or 800 to 1,200 cavalry. And then when it comes to artillery, 2 bases is a small unit. So it's not a single battery. It's important to remember it's a congregation of core reserve guns. So a small unit, 12 to 19 guns, and 3 bases is a large unit, so 20 to 30 guns. So typically at a core level game you shouldn't be seeing too many of those on the table. In terms of basing your figures, so for 12 to 18 mil figures, these are the typical basing conventions. So base sizes are 30 millimeters deep and 40 millimeters wide as the most common base you'll see on the table. And this base size applies to all infantry and cavalry, to medium and horse artillery, and all attachments. Then you get a couple of types, troop types, that are on 40 by 40 mil bases, and these are heavy artillery as well as your corps and divisional commanders. The line of communication marker that every army needs is 60 mils by 60 mils. A nice opportunity to do a bit of a diorama and modeling of something looking nice, not a green square base like in the image. And then you get, we don't see a lot of these on the table, but redoubt. So redoubt is it goes around the edge of the front edge and side edges of a unit. So both for small and large redoubts they'll be 60 millimeters deep, and a small redoubt will be 110 mils wide and a large one 150 mils wide. So as you can see in the diagram, it's really just to form a perimeter around your unit that is then fixed in the redoubt. When it comes to how many figures per base, it's up to the player really to decide, but the convention is line infantry could be typically 6 or 8 figures on a base, 2 deep. Light infantry is slightly different, so it's 6 to 8 figures on the back base, so they'll look like normal line infantry. But to show that they're light infantry, the front 2 or 3 bases, if it's a large unit, would have 3 or 4 figures on each of the bases. And then irregular light infantry are 3 or 4 figures. When it comes to cavalry, so you get irregular light cavalry skirmish. So these are like your Cossacks, would be 2 figures on a base. Other cavalry would be 3 figures on a base. Artillery is 1 gun model per base, and then gain up to the player 2 to 4 figures, depends how much you want to paint. And sometimes people use different numbers to show whether it's horse, medium or heavy guns. And finally your commanders, so corps commanders are 3 figures or can be more, and divisional commanders are 2 figures, and brigade commanders are 1 or 2 figures. And then your ADC marker is 1 figure, and when it comes to base size for an ADC, you can really choose. Sometimes people put them on a round base, but it's up to you. Smaller the better, so it doesn't get in the way on the table, because it's really just a marker. When it comes to organising your army, so I said I'd give a bit more detail. So armies must have between 2 and 4 divisions. At 800 points, typically you'd have 12 to 15 units, although on occasion you will see really small armies, so guard or really elite armies as small as 8 units, and sometimes people like to go with as big as possible, so up to 16 units. So what we've got in the image there is an infantry division, so you can see a couple of batteries of artillery, 3 units of infantry, one of them small, well, 2 of them small, one with an attachment which I'll talk a bit more about, and then a large unit at 6 bases, and one with an artillery attachment also. I'll give you more detail. And then this division has got a divisional commander who's got a couple of ADCs, which tells us that he's skilled, and again I'll give you a bit more detail on that. And it's just important to note that all artillery units must be in the same division in FOG Napoleonics. So as I said earlier, they represent the core reserve, and what we're trying to depict is the corps commander or the army commander deploying the corps reserve artillery to one division. So yeah, they all need to be in one division. A mixed division is a division that's got some infantry units to brigades and some cavalry brigades. So in this example, you can see there's 3 infantry brigades and 1 cavalry. You can have up to 2 cavalry units in a mixed division. And then there's a competent divisional commander at the back there. And you know he's competent because he's got 1 ADC. And then finally he has a cavalry division, which is, as it says, it's cavalry, so it's only cavalry units in the division. It could include, if there wasn't an artillery battery in any of the other divisions, it could have a artillery battery as well. And so it's 3 units there, 2 of them small, 1 of them large, and again a competent divisional commander. And then of course you have to then, for the whole army, you have a corps commander, who we'll talk about commanders shortly, but yeah, there's the corps commander, and he's got 1 ADC, so that tells you he's also competent. And he's obviously not attached to any particular division, he controls them all. So I said I'd talk a bit more about attachments. So units can include attachments of infantry, artillery, cavalry, or a brigade commander. You can't have more than 2 attachments in any one unit. So what's an infantry attachment? It's firstly, as it says there, it costs you 6 points, so they're fairly cheap. They represent up to a battalion of light infantry. So you recall a unit is a brigade, and really what the attachment is over and above skirmishes that have been attached to that brigade. So it could be as much as a battalion of light infantry, and the effect of them is they give you extra fire effect at medium range. So you typically get 1 extra dice, or if you're unreformed even more, but we'll talk more about that under firing. Artillery attachments are a lot more expensive, which tells you they're a lot more effective, so they're 14 points, and they represent your typical battery of guns, so 6 guns that one will often read about. Those are the attachments, so players often wonder why you only get up to 2 batteries or units of guns in FOG Napoleonics in an army of 800 points. It's the lower level deployment of guns is depicted by these attachments, and as it says they're representing up to a battery of 6 guns, and they also give extra fire effect like infantry attachments. Then you get cavalry attachments. They're only 4 points each. A nice filler if you've got a few extra points left, but can be quite effective. So they're representing a squadron of cavalry, again that's deployed, brigaded with the infantry unit, and their effect is to frighten off the enemy skirmishers, keep them honest. So the effect of them is they reduce enemy infantry fire. And then the last one is a brigade commander attachment. So they cost you 12 points, pretty effective. And they're representing, obviously every brigade has got a brigade commander inherent in the unit, but the brigade commander attachment is representing either additional officers, maybe an ADC has been sent from the commander-in-chief to get the unit more focused on the job at hand, or you've got a brigade commander who's have outstanding capability, so we depict that by an attachment, and what they help you do is to rally, to make complex moves, and basically it makes the unit a little bit more independent. Then when we talk about the different formations in FOG Napoleonic, you get the standard formation is tactical, and that's represented typically 2 wide and 2 deep. If it's a small unit, a large unit would be the same, except obviously 3 wide. And you also have the option of making a large unit deeper, which you could be doing to give you more frontage on the table if you're trying to have a massed attack in one smaller area. But also helps you in combat in that last rank counts as rear support, but we'll talk about that in combat. But that's tactical formation. Then you get extended line. An extended line can be used by infantry or cavalry. Remember, we're talking about a whole brigade here, so typically you wouldn't see all that often a whole brigade out in extended line, so you don't see this on the table very often. This is quite good for reducing long range fire from enemy artillery. But also at close range, an infantry unit will put out, it counts as 2 units for close range fire when it's in this formation. So it puts out a lot more fire, but then is of course more vulnerable to 2 enemy units massing against it. So it has its pros and cons, and you also don't want to be caught in that formation if you're charged by cavalry. March column, this is for getting around fast on the table, and it's only really useful on roads or through difficult terrain. And you're represented by placing your bases 1 base wide and then 4 to 6 deep, depending on whether you're a small or a large unit. A square is obviously to fend off cavalry, and the way we depict that is by turning the rear ranks backwards. And irregular infantry don't want to be caught by cavalry in the open because they can't form square, and as you'll see as we go through the rules, infantry are not surprisingly very vulnerable to cavalry in the open if the infantry aren't in square. And then finally onto artillery. So an unlimbered unit of artillery is represented by placing the bases 1 deep, 1 next to the other. And even if space is constrained, this is the formation you have to be in. You don't have an option. So if there's no space, they wouldn't be able to deploy, they wouldn't be able to unlimber, because limbered is represented 1 wide, 2 deep. Preferable obviously to have a model of a limbered limber and the horses pulling it along, but sometimes for expedience players will often just place the 2 batteries one behind the other, facing away from the direction of movement, as you can see in the picture.